Jurassic Park was out in the theaters, and it was awesome because there's these massive dinosaurs that were just amazing. And people were like, oh, this is really cool. I can't wait to see this in the theater. And the particular theater that was in my town that I grew up in would actually sell those massive vats of popcorn. Like those really, like, you could fit your entire head in and still have half the popcorn left. I mean,
isn't that, like, standard nowadays? Like, even the small... You could fit your foot in. Like, Shaq could dip his foot in a small popcorn nowadays.
Wow. Well, we're getting cheated in the popcorn over here in Ohio, I guess. I don't know. But, I mean, this lady had... It was a big vat. It was a tub. So, we noticed it because she was carrying, before the movie started, she was carrying down the road. Like, wow, look at all that popcorn. She could feed the whole row. So, we're watching the movie. We're enthralled by this thing. She's like 5 rows down. And... me and my friends are watching this movie. It's fantastic. And there's a scene in Jurassic Park where the raptors it's halfway through the movie, the raptors are loose, they're terrorizing the people, and this guy thinks he's safe, kind of combing the way through the old raptor cage or whatever. He's just like, okay, I think I'm okay. And all of a sudden, the raptor just like blasts its head through the side thing, goes, ah! Like right in the face of the movie, right? Like it comes right at you. Mm-hmm. This woman screams. I mean, we're talking like death now. Like she freaks out, and you'd have thought there'd been a bomb in her tub of popcorn. It was a cloud, a nuclear cloud of popcorn showered a 5-person radius around her. She emptied the whole damn tub. Like, you could hear the popcorn clattering against people, chairs, the floor, the whole thing. That whole tub went up. It was gone. And I couldn't figure out if I felt more bad for, like, everybody around them getting showered in buttered, salted popcorn in the middle of a movie, or the fact that she had just emptied that whole tub, and it was gone. I mean, I'm sure there was nothing left after that. I was just like, wow, that sucks. That raptor stole your popcorn.
You forget about the unlucky soul or souls that are going to have to go through and pick that all up, because no broom can get under all those seats.
No broom's going to do that. No.
There's no Bissell on earth that's going to be able to pick that shit up.
That's a tub's worth, Let's say there is a broom. You need 3 brooms. That's a multi-person task to get that cleaned up. It's a movie. You got 15 minutes before the next one starts while they're rewinding the film. Back when film was actually on film.
How funny would it be if the lady went back up to the counter like, your movie just scared me, and I lost all my popcorn as a result. I'd like a refill. And they're like, what? Like, yes, I got very scared, and it all went flying everywhere.
It'd be like, lady, that was... And the thing is, she'd probably win that, because it'd be like, lady, that was a $30 tub of popcorn. We can't just replace that. And she'd be like, actually, it was a $2 tub of popcorn, and you charged me $30 for it. And they'd be like, that's a good point. Here you go.
And nowadays, it'd be like, well, if you'd like, you can get the large popcorn with the large drink with unlimited refills, and they'll suck you into it because it's like $2 more.
Right.
And unlimited the unlimited refill.
What the fuck is that? Who goes in and gets unlimited refills in the middle of a movie?
Well, not only that, the only way you're getting to the bottom of that tub of popcorn is if a raptor pokes its head out and you think it's going to eat your face. And then it ends up all over you, your friends, and everyone in the 5-row race.
And where do you see movies? Because I need to go to that place. Like, we don't get tubs like that. What a blessed indulgence.
It really is, though. And you put, like, that just straight fat that's butter flavored on top. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
I actually tried. I went and saw Gravity the other day. Mm. And I tried to do popcorn without the butter. It's like, this tastes like not very good.
It tastes like styrofoam.
I went out, salted styrofoam.
Yeah, seriously,
Then I went out, I put some butter on it. Like, all right, I can get down with this. This works for me.
See, there are some foods that are like that, like popcorn and salad and often French fries and wings. They're not made for you to taste them themselves. They're made for you to taste whatever dipping sauce or salad dressing or coating that you put on the quote-unquote food itself. I mean, a really quality thing of French fries, that's how you know it's really good. You can eat French fries or salad or popcorn or wings or whatever by itself, it's really good. For everything else, it's all about the sauce.
You know what? You know how I travel a lot for my work?
Mm.
So I'll always try and find like a local mom and pop pizza shop. And I will always get a cheese pie. Because I feel like that's the best way to know how good it is. Like, I'll get half cheese and half with, say, like, pineapple and onion, or pineapple and basically anything I find delicious. And then, just in case, I'll make sure to get some ranch. Because if any of y'all haven't dipped your pizza in some ranch, you are missing out on a whole new world of awesomeness.
I almost started singing for you, but that judgment being the better part of valor on that one.
No, go ahead, let it out.
No, not with my I feel so awesome voice.
Alright, well, get down into your awesome voice, and what is going to be the scope of the night?
Let's talk about building your twink from scratch. Regardless of what bracket you play in, we've talked about different cultures of different brackets. We've talked about being able to get into some advanced topics of how to choose particular stats in particular situations. But I want to go back to basics with this. I want to talk about when you're in a new bracket, or if you're even getting into twinking for the first time, where you're really learning to min-max your gear, what to look for and how to go about doing that. And more importantly, the pitfalls to watch out for when we do that. That's what I want to get into tonight.
Alright, so I'm just going to throw this out there. I'd say what brackets exist now are what, 20 to 24, 85 to 89. I do believe 70s are picking up some steam.
Really?
Yeah. I keep seeing like Baked and people saying some stuff about 70 arenas and such.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. So like in all of those brackets, is it fair to say that in general, the rules apply?
Yeah, it is. I mean, every bracket's going to have specifics about it, but the way you go about building your twink from scratch, discovering what's the best gear, and the way to go about balancing your stats for your particular playstyle pretty much works the same. So the first thing to do, just to make life easier on yourself, the easy way to go about doing it is find other players with armories you can look up. Sometimes you'll dig it up on the Twink info forums. Sometimes you'll twink it. Sometimes you'll find it in the Battleground forums for a particular bracket where you'll see people make a comment. You'll notice they're the same class that you want to be in that bracket. Getting a nice selection of even just 2 or 3 different players who have the same armory that you do, of the class that you want, I mean, that can really help as a starting base. And that's the key part there. It's a good starting base when you get an idea of, you see 3 monks, for example, and they're all wearing the same chest piece. There's something there. Maybe it's because BOAs are strong in a particular bracket, or maybe if it's in the higher brackets, this is the one drop that you want to get. But getting a baseline idea can really help you on your way. The real key, though, is once you get that far, Wowhead is your friend. I'm not asking you to do a really complicated multi-threaded search that has a bunch of parameters, but being able to go to Wowhead and say, filter this by level, so that, for example, I want to see all the pieces between 85 and 89 that are male that I can wear on my head. That's all I want to see. And getting the range there will get you an idea of, okay, these are all the different head pieces available to me in this bracket. How much of a difference is that going to make? And
this might be a question that doesn't even actually have an answer. But when you're going through and you're looking at the gear, I mean, obviously a piece of 89 gear is going to be, by default, stronger than a piece of 85 gear. But when you are in the battleground setting, scaling sets in.
Right. That brings us to the second thing that's really important, especially for the live brackets right now, all 2 of them, is that while you have stronger gear at the higher end of the bracket when it comes to raw stats, find out what the scaling is like for your bracket. It is ridiculously different depending on your bracket. So, for example, the really strong scaling brackets, which are 80 to 84, 85 to 89, and 10 to 14. Those are really strong scaling, where the difference between what you do in the lower end of the bracket is a lot. You get your stats scale upward a lot more strongly when you are, say, an 80 and you go all the way up to 84. If you enter the battleground as an 84, you get no scaling, so you actually won't have your stats blow up into bigger things like you do as if you were an 80. Every bracket's different, and finding out specifically what it is for your bracket, and right now we're talking just battlegrounds, that's a really big deal. I can't emphasize that enough. There's an entire, I don't know if it's a post or a thread, but they do a really good job over on Twink Info for the 2024 bracket to tell you how gear scales. They've done a lot of research on a lot of particular pieces of gear. Find out if that lucky fishing hat that scales from 15 stam to 17 stam is worth staying 24 versus going to 22 or 24. That's a really big deal. It's going to be different when, for example, in the 80-84 bracket, the best levels in the battleground, if you really want to optimize your stats right now, are 81 and 82. If you go to 84, you're simply not going to have as good a stats. It's going to be a mistake. Whereas if you stay 80, especially for the lighter armor classes like cloth, that's also a mistake. You're going to get better, and we're talking just battlegrounds now, you're going to get better stats out of 81, 82. In fact, for that bracket, just about every class does its best at either 81 or 82. It's not the case for 85 to 89. There's reasons to stay 85. There's reasons to go other levels. That's what you want to go digging for. You're going to look at the armories of these players, and you're going to see some good overall base trends, but you want to find the diamonds in the rough. And you don't have to spend hours doing this, but a quick perusal through a particular slot for your armor class is going to really help pick up some things. Maybe it'll make you look at things that you just didn't consider before.
And I'll just throw this out there as well. Wowhead at first can seem a little daunting, even though people will be like, lol, check Wowhead. Why did you ask that question? Sometimes it's like you got to comb through the gear, and that can be a bit cumbersome. And believe me, I sympathize with all the people that are a bit lazy. Another option would be go to the Battleground forums on Blizzard. There actually is an 85 thread. There is a 20 to 24 thread, and there may even be a 70 thread. But you can also go to places like TI, and you can see the people that are posting. A lot of time in their signatures, they'll have a link to their toons. And that can give you a very quick, very easy, this dude looks like he knows what he's talking about. I'll give him a click and see what they're doing.
That's a really great suggestion, especially for the Battleground forums where when someone posts on their character, there's a link to their armory right there from their character. It's a fantastic way to do it. And what is really interesting to find are the exceptions. If you go through the Battleground forums, or you go through a bunch of SIGs and Twink Info, it takes like 5-10 minutes to gather up a bunch of stuff. You don't have to read anything. You just go looking for all the monks, or all the chamois, or all the warriors. And you go finding all the ones there that match your bracket. When you go looking through your gear, you're going to see all the gear that matches. It's the gear that doesn't match. That's really interesting. When you have 5 warriors...
Find the outliers.
The outliers. When you have 4 warriors who are wearing the same shoulders, and the 5th one has something different, that's important. Did the 5th one just not gear up to what the other 4 have? Does it look markedly better when they would finally finish their gearing? Or is that 5th warrior with the unusual shoulder choice have something special going on there? What is going on there? This happens often when you look at, for example, the 85 bracket. If you're going to get a sun loot, if you're going to be a melee class, and it's like, all right, chamois are supposed to be two-handed with melee. That's usually what they do best on. But why am I seeing this chamois who decided to level to 87 with a sun loot? That's an outlier. There's reasons to do that. There's reasons not to do that. That's what you're looking for. When you get armories of a bunch of different players who have the same class, and hopefully the same spec, that'll give you an idea of of the different choices available to you that can make a difference. It's really interesting to see, for example, in the 39 bracket, you'll see a bunch of healers, whether they're druids or even pallies and chamois. It's like, how come this green whelp armor keeps showing up on all of them? That's weird. Why are they wearing a spirit chest? And then the only other answer there...
Go out on a limb, and you can say it technically, but I'll just say it's because we like to make Buck have a snooze.
Yeah. There's different, cultural dedicated initiatives of the bracket that you need to fulfill. Or you can read the tooltip, and it says something about it puts the player to sleep. And you're like, really? The player to sleep, and you're willing to give up main stats and have a bunch of spirit on there? That makes no sense. But when you see the 5th healer wearing that thing, then you're like, all right, well, there must be something worthwhile. What is it? And that's when you go into Wowhead, you look up the piece of armor, start looking at the comments, and you find out that the procs have absolutely no DR. That they literally can go back-to-back snooze, and you can put someone into a nap for a long time. Or it can not work at all, and you can die in the middle of a gulch because the damn thing wouldn't proc at all. Those are the kinds of things that are worth finding out.
And there's also, if you can add to this, but like I'll use the 20 to 24 bracket as an example. Like, if you're going to make a Shadow Priest, the difference between a level 20 Shadow Priest and a level 24 Shadow Priest is basically the difference between an Enhancement Shaman and an Ellie Shammy at, say, level 20. I mean, it is night and day. You're going from your wet noodle to I have my BFG and Duke Nukem laughing as he blows your face off.
That's a really good example. Finding out where those differences lie. Whereas if you're a 20 enhancement shaman versus a 24 enhancement shaman, you're just a different kind of noodle. I mean, it's all the same pasta. So
we're going from rigatoni to a little bit of tortellini here. Oh,
yeah.
fettuccine.
No, yeah, because I don't think tortellini's got stuff inside it, and enhancement's pretty empty right now.
But if we're going Shadow Priest, there's definitely going to be a little bit of extra.
There's some stuffing in there. I'm just saying, It's spicy. Yep. So that's worth looking into. The scaling, why people choose for the main part the gear that they do, and why people choose outlier gear that they do. So that gives you the basics. That's not, again, everything that I'm talking about here sounds like it's going to be a big research project, and let's put it where it is. You know, we don't want to sit here and make a massive multi-hour research project out of this unless you're me and like to obsess over that, but the vast majority of us don't. You know, we just want to get a gear set, grind it out, be done with it, because it's one of the neatest things about twinking is you can be done with a gear set and go out and play. That's what you want to do. I'm not saying go make a huge research project out of it. I'm saying that little bit of extra research to figure out why people do certain things can get you out of some holes that you may not realize you'll fall into. And that's where I want to take this for our next step of basic gearing for a twink and what to look into for a particular bracket, is to look at stat balance. Specifically, why people gear for or choose certain stats over another. Depending on your playstyle, there are reasons that, for example, you might stack crit. Because as a DPS, ain't nothing more fun than seeing a big old crit blow somebody up. Let's just put it where it is.
When you just see that gigantic number and you see a face melt, it's like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing of beauty. And that is a big deal for a DPS. However, depending on what you're playing, it may be better that you stack haste. It might be you're waiting for a proc or a bunch of procs, or you're just going to stack and dogpile a whole bunch of crap on top of your enemy. Haste may be the way to go. Or you might be that player that is all about dots and you can hit a breakpoint with your haste.
I'll just do a quick synopsis on breakpoint.
Okay.
Breakpoints are basically a mystical number where when you reach it, you get an additional tick. So let's say you're a chamois and you're dropping Healing Tide. If you hit the breakpoint, you will get an extra tick of Healing Tide. So let's say it should pulse 6 times, it will pulse 7. If you're a Warlock and your dot should hit 8 times, it'll hit 9 times. So it's really important to know those breakpoints in the sense that, like, oh, I can get 1,000 haste. But really, if you had 800 haste, it does the exact same thing as having 1,000. You can allocate those stats to, say, crit or spell power or mastery, depending upon the bracket you're in.
That's exactly right. And that's a big deal if you are playing a class where breakpoints make a difference. If you're going to stack 1,000 haste, but it won't look any different than 800 haste because you hit the breakpoint at that point, that's 200 haste that will have close to no effect that you could put into something else like mastery or like crit or into a more defensive stat or survivability stat. Those are the kinds of things that you want to know when you're stacking your stats.
Do you think people know we play casters since we just ignored strength and agility completely?
Yeah, seriously. But that brings up a good point there, too. It's like you might stack crit or haste, but then there might be a question of why not just stack a main stat instead, because you can get some crit out of that by itself. You won't get as much crit. But if you have to choose between getting a bunch of secondary stats or just getting stronger on the primary stat, that may be the better way to go.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, everyone loves the burst, but sometimes sustained pressure can really make a healer's life miserable.
Yeah. Sustained pressure can make a real difference. And at the end of the day, when you're in a battleground or in an arena, keeping the pressure up is really what PvP is about. It's nice to see a big crit happen, to see a real just end the day type of thing. But in order to even get there, unless you're in a ridiculously bursty bracket, a couple of big crits are just not going to end the game. What you need is a setup for that. You need the CCs, you need the interrupts, you need to get someone down to 2/3 of their health for 2 crits to make a difference. For them to be halfway down and all of a sudden, surprise, huge crit, you didn't see that coming. That's where your burst makes a difference. They have to be set up there in the first place. Having teammates, or being that teammate that puts the constant pressure on so that healers are working overtime to keep things going, or that people can't work overtime because there's a bunch of CC flying around, or that you're interrupting people, whether you're caster or melee, those are the kinds of ways you can look to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's why choosing which stats you want to specialize in are so important. Let's talk about healers as an example of that for just a second, because this is a pet peeve of mine. If you are doing a DPS, big crits make a difference. If you're a healer, one of your big enemies is overhealing. It's healing that does nothing. If you've got one of your teammates has lost 1/3 of their health, and you have a big crit heal, it not only fills up that 1/3 back up, but then goes 1/3 beyond, it does nothing. That does nothing for your teammate. If you have...
But it pads your overhealing stats. Those are pretty important.
Oh, but yeah, I mean, the pads the stats something fierce. Whereas if you have haste, and you hit a breakpoint on a hot if you're a druid, or if you have more survivability as opposed to crit, so that you actually live longer, you can afford to get that one extra heal off on a teammate before you have to start taking care of yourself, that's going to have a greater impact. It drives me bonkers to see healers stack crit because they want to see the big numbers just like DPS. You are not there to pop the big numbers. You're there to be ridiculously efficient and piss off the other side because they can't get your teammates down. That is so important as a good healer. Look for the stats that make a difference in what you do. So for healers, unless you have an ability that procs off of crit, stay away from the crit. It's not going to be that big a deal. If you're in a position where you need to rely on crit heals to keep somebody up, you've got a ton of damage coming in already, and that needs to be CC'd or interrupted.
Well, let me ask you this. What about in super bursty brackets, like, say, 20 to 24 if there's some 24s on the other side, or 85s? Do you think that enhances the value of crit? Just because sometimes you'll, get a Shadow Priest hit you with a Mind Blast, health's down. Yes, you can't rely on the crit, but sometimes Thorough Put just won't cut it, so you might need to rely upon that crit.
It's a great question, and I think it's a matter of good and better. There's no doubt that crit can help. I mean, a crit heal is always beautiful to see as a healer, and it's always aggravating to see as someone who just was about to kill someone, all of a sudden they're back up to full health.
Yeah.
But I will say this. If you are in a bracket with high burst, then one of two things is going on. Either the burst is high enough that it doesn't matter if they crit heal anyway, because the next wave of burst coming in 10 seconds is about to go crazy again. So at that point, you're already in trouble, just because the bracket's ridiculous. Or you could stack a little more stam as opposed to crit, or in some brackets cases, a lot more stam, and that 20%, I'm making some number out of the air, of extra survivability, even though you won't be critting as much, buys you the extra time to get the non-crit heal off. Being able to live that little bit longer, to be able to get, whether you're a priest putting bubbles on, or a chamois putting heals on, or a pally doing all the above, it's, a healer's job is to buy time, is to buy as much time as possible, and crit is not the best way to go about doing that, even if it's a high burst bracket.
So then, in general, what is your suggestion? Is it stam and, say, haste intellect type thing, or?
It used to be intellect because it was so neat to see all the mana, and the crit, and the spell power that came from that. And now that we have normalized mana pools, it's nice. It really depends on the bracket, though. For 2024, with the burst that's going through there, absolutely stam. In fact, all the highest scaling brackets, I would say, go for stam. Depending on class, stam, you can never go wrong with having enough stam. I mean, that's always going to help you. If you are going to be doing battlegrounds, and you're a hot healer, as a priest, or as a... Priests don't do hot healing so much. Basically, as a druid might consider haste. For... Mana regen's not an issue, so spirit's pretty much out the window, and depending on your bracket, but just mana's just not an issue for most brackets right now as a caster. So I would say to go for survivability and stam.
As a quick sidebar, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
It's a damn shame. As a caster, and especially as a healer, a mana limited a fight. Basically, it forced you to really pay attention to how efficient you were with your heals, who you were going to keep up, who you were going to let die. It had to make you pay attention to some really important decisions about how you were going to spend your available time healing, because you were going to run out of mana in like 15, 20 seconds. That whole spam healing thing, that really hasn't happened until the last couple years. There was no way you could spam heal back in TBC and be done in 10 seconds. It was it. 10 seconds, your mana's gone. And I don't care how much regen you have, you're getting one more heal off maybe 3 seconds after that.
And do you remember the times of swapping to a spirit weapon? Just for those few seconds you had of combat?
Just for those few seconds.
Just to get that little extra bit, which may or may not change the tide.
In 19s, and I wasn't in this bracket at the time, but these are the stories of the legend, right? If you were in 19s and you were a healer, you probably had a whole spirit set. You literally had an entire gear set.
Gosh, I wish I remembered. There was a staff that just had, it was like 16 spirit or something.
It was a ton.
And then people would put like 30 spirit on it.
Right, they'd use all the spirit and chance that you would never use in any other context, right? So after you won a quick battle in mid, because the battle was over in 30 seconds because people ran out of mana, then once that was done, you sat down and you drank to get your mana back while you did a quick switch out of your gear into your spirit set. That was a really big deal.
This may make me sound like a terrible player or not, but I may or may not have had a little spirit set for the hunter when there was mana, as I was running from point A to point B. In between.
People would talk about that. If you were running from point to point and there's a really good chance you weren't going to get caught by a rogue, then switch to your spirit set for those 20 extra seconds to get a fifth of your mana back. Because that was 1 or 2 extra heals or 1 or 2 extra abilities that the hunter had launched off. It was just like that little bit extra of an edge that made such a difference. What mana did is it put a time limit on what one section of the game did. If your melee and casters combined couldn't end a fight or route a fight in a particular direction after 20 seconds, then all of a sudden the casters got taken out of the equation. Just like that. And then it was all about the melee. And it became a whole different, literally the game shifted gears at that point.
And it was like, there was a whole thing, like one of the reasons I think I'm so terrible at playing melee, besides the fact that I'm melee retarded, is I'm not good with a renewable resource. I'm much better with knowing what I start with, and I guess working with a depletable resource.
Yeah.
I know where I start, I know where I end. And I think that's kind of part of what went into playing, especially healer, because casters still will run into that problem. But for whatever reason, healers generally do not in the lower levels.
I haven't run out, and this is my experience only as a chamois, but I have not run out of mana as an Ellie or as a resto to the point where I just keep my lightning shield all the time. There's no point having a water shield. If you're using a water shield as a chamois in 20s, take a good hard look about whether you really need that, or find out why you keep landing in situations where you are spam healing everybody, and A, it's not being enough to turn the tide, B, while you're spam healing, no one's targeted you to figure out that you're spam healing. And in both cases, they're probably not your fault. If you can get away with spam healing that long, that is not about you or your team. And if your entire team can get spam healed and still not pull off the day, that's not about you either. But that's the kind of thing where it's like, it doesn't even matter. If you're a caster, mana doesn't matter right now in a lot of brackets, and that's a shame.
Alright, that was way too long of a tangent.
It was, but it was an important
for that.
So stats. Choosing what stat you want to make a difference for your gameplay is a combination of understanding what your role is about, and also, and this is the more important one, how you like to play. I can criticize healers who use crit, but at the end of the day, if you love doing the big rescue heal, it's not the way I'd recommend doing it because you're going to have more deaths than you will heals. I get that, that's why you would stack crit as a healer. If you want to be the person, the warlock who is just putting sustained pressure on with lots of CCs and so forth, you may want haste for extra dots. If you want high damage casting, you might want crit. If you want high damage melee, you may want crit.
Or what about even like with CC classes, like let's say a mage or a warlock do you think haste would come more into play? Like, get that fear off quicker, get that sheep off quicker, get that frostfire bolt, or...
It's a great question. It totally depends on the bracket. If you're in the upper brackets, absolutely. That makes a bit. There's enough haste in the upper brackets where that's a viable choice. In the lower brackets, you're just not stacking enough haste to make that a positive. An 8% difference in a long cast is... I'm about to be a total hypocrite with this. It's all likely. I will say this. As an offensive caster, you're probably not going to see as much of a difference out of haste as you will crit, because the chances of you doing back-to-back casting are pretty slim. You're usually going to either be doing instant casts, or you're going to do a couple instant casts, slam down a couple of long casts, and go back to instants.
You know what this reminds me of? Remember when I was playing Ellie for a little while in 29s, and I went just ape shit trying to get the best haste set possible?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm throwing out lightning bolts at record pace. And you're like, yeah, that's great. But you're doing like 25% less damage with each one.
Yeah.
God damn it, I hate you.
Yeah. Whether or not you can do back-to-back casts, it's a tenuous proposition at best. But the fact that you can crit on any particular one is pretty strong. Which is why the healers go for the opposite. If you don't need the crits, then having that little bit more of a chance of getting the cast off before someone can kick you or interrupt you, I have 3.5% haste in the 20 bracket, and it sounds ridiculous, but my efficiency has gone up more than 3.5%. People just barely miss either getting that cast down, blocking it out, or there's been situations where it's like someone's just about to die, but I get the heal in just barely in time. And I saw a difference in doing that between having 0% haste and 3.5% haste.
Let me ask you this. This is a little bit of another sidebar. But with the interrupts and everything, if there, like, let's say there's 2 rogues and a chamois on you, and you need to heal everyone else, and obviously you need to heal yourself, how do you handle that?
You run. If you've got 2 rogues and a chamois on you.
But let's say you can't run. Do you go, I guess I should have prefaced that a little better. Do you go for trying to juke all 3? Do you assume that maybe they can't juke, so you throw out one kind of fake cast, play it out, and go with it?
Depends on the bracket. But for the most part, I'm a stubborn enough and arrogant enough person to think I can juke all 3. So what I'll do is, in that situation, and that's happened before, actually, that's kind of aggravating, is if someone's going to try and kick you right away, it's going to happen no matter what. So I'll do like half a cast to bait them. If they're decent players and they're waiting for me to get most of the way there, usually about halfway, give or take, is going to be enough to do a juke. Then I'll stop it and see how many kicks and interrupts I do. The problem is with 3 people on you, if they're really all on you, you get one good chance. If not all 3 of them buy it, then just go ahead and do the cast a second time. Because if you try and juke them a second time, by the time you go for that 3rd cast, assuming you do it, you're still going to be dead anyway.
Yeah. And if you're not dead, someone else is dead. The reason I ask is because this happened to me the other night. And I juked one chamois, one rogue, and then the other rogue was like, yes, I'm not biting. And then, like, the 3 people, including myself, died. I was like, God damn it!
Yeah. That's a hard spot to be, because you want to see if you can pull 3. But here, it's 3 against 1. The bigger deal is that if you do a juke, and you make people blow a couple of kicks on you, and you still die, that buys, everything you do to attract attention like that buys a little more extra time for the people around you. That means the caster next to you is not getting juked. In fact, he's not even getting attention onto him. And that's where it's the DPS's role to start peeling a little bit so that you live a little longer. That's a situation that you run into where it's like, if you've got that many people on you, really look for self-survivability, because the longer you stay alive is the longer you're tanking all that crap coming in at you that your team doesn't have to worry about. And that buys your team a little extra time to focus somebody down.
So does this go back to your saying Stam may or may not be a good thing to go for?
Yeah. Haste is all nice and good. Big crits are well and good. The longer you live, if it's a super high burst bracket, it doesn't matter. Like, but it has to be it has to be like 49s. Even in 20 to 24, having that, going from like, say, 1500 health to 1800 health or 18 to 2100 health, that can buy you an extra second. And that extra second is maybe the difference if you were getting a global off or not, which may be the interrupting the mage that was about to blow your ass away with the fireball. It might be purging the shield that was on the guy next to you that lets your teammates kill someone right when you die. So now it's a 4 versus 4. It's a 3 versus 3. Mm-hmm. So it keeps things even. That's the big deal there. And that's the other thing to think about when you're making your twink. A lot of people like, what's my raw DPS? What's my raw HPS? How much healing and damage can I do? Look at your class and your spec and find out what percentage of the time you're going to be using your utility stuff. If you are going to be a warlock, you'll do damage, but your damage is not going to be important as getting those fears off. And it doesn't matter how much spell power or how much int or whatever you have on a fear. A fear is a fear. So being able to live a little longer to get that fear off may be a worthwhile pursuit. Same thing with a chamois. You're going to have big heal stats and so forth. Chamois are just known in that bracket as not being the top healers. They don't have the great stats there, but that's not why you play a chamois. If you're looking to get super high healing stats, then a chamois not for you. That's not the class you want to play. Take a really good hard look at why you want to play your class and spec, and take advantage, while acknowledging at the same time the deficiencies, of what your class offers.
That's a goddamn amazing point right there. And that might be something that is a hindrance to people when they're starting to try and make a toon.
I think it's a big mistake that a lot of players make where they really want the big stats. And you're right to pursue that. You want the big stats. You want to make a difference with your gear. But look at the big picture of what you'll be doing with your toon, and you may discover that you will make a bigger difference being that hunter that CCs, you got to get someone in a scatter or does something else like that or gets a pet stun in because you stayed alive long enough to do it. That when your lower DPS lives longer, you're going to come out with overall higher damage.
Wait, let's use last night as an example. And for you guys, we're recording this on a Wednesday. So last night we were playing some games, and we were up against a stronger group. I think.
Certified stronger group. Yeah.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
And it came down to them picking up the flag or Rise capping the flag. Dak came in with a hammer, and there was nothing they could do. Yeah. Rise capped the flag. It's not going to show up on the scorecard, but that's the reason that Alliance won and Horde lost.
Yeah. There's no spell power on a hammer. There's no haste on a hammer. There's nothing on a hammer, you know?
All a hammer needs to do is land and make that motherfucker confused for a few seconds.
That's all it took. Dak won that game for us because of an absolutely on-the-spot hammer where, that guy was like literally 3 yards from the flag. I just basically hurtled over this stun guy and landed on the flag for that cap, thanks to that hammer. That's the kind of difference. And that's what you want to look at when you're choosing a class. Yeah, your stats are a big deal, but at the end of the day, the reason you choose the gear that you do and the stats that you do is to augment what you want to do with your character. Figure that out first. Figure out if you want to be the big hitter and what class you're going to use to leverage that, or if you're going to be the super support class, however you want to do it. But make sure that the stats that you choose complement what you want in your playstyle. Because if you're choosing stats that work against you or don't offer you as big of an opportunity to let you shine, and those stats might surprise you, you're going to come up short compared to other players. And that's where things get counterintuitive.
And has there ever been a bigger time, or a better time in WoW, I should say, where you have the customizational ability to create the toon that you actually want? Whether it be haste, crit, strength, agility.
Oh my goodness. You know, for all that we can complain about for things being out of whack and WoW, and there's a lot to complain about. Let's put it where it is. Being able to have at your disposal so many different enchantments and so many different augmentations, on top of a lot of different gear choices. There's a lot of the reasons that people chose particular types of gear in particular brackets was because that was the only one that took particular enchants. Not anymore. There's a lot more selection available.
I mean, Christ, there was a time at 39s where I wore the hat from DM, the shadowy mitts, because I thought chamois would just be great with some haste. And it worked for a little bit, but then I realized, no, I'm just fooled into thinking that I have more haste than I should. I should really be going a different route. And that includes maybe a little bit more stamina fez cap.
Yeah. That's the thing that'll fool you here, is everything what we're talking about tonight, it's not like, I mean, unless you're, a hunter trying to stack intellect still, or a mage stacking strength. I joke about that, but unless you're doing something like that, it's hard to make a bad choice. I mean, it's not a matter of like, oh, you're going to choose the wrong stat. They're all good stats. More crit is better. More haste is better. More stam is better. There's all good choices. That's not what we're talking about here. There's a lot of good choices and a lot of reasons you can have them. What we're talking about is figuring out what it is about your playstyle that you enjoy the most so that you can make the choice that's right for you.
And also, whether it's, say you're in the 20 to 24 bracket, sometimes 24 isn't the best bet.
That's really important. Sometimes when you're in all the time, when you're in the 80 to 84 bracket, being at the bottom or the top of the bracket's not the best bet. That's where you have to watch out for things. You can learn a lot from the armories of what people have chosen for their gear, but just like you, they were looking at what other people had, and things get propagated person to person as what's the best thing to have. This is the best piece of gear. This is the best way this is the best stat to stack. This is the best way to go.
Is WoW gearing just a ridiculous version of Whisper down the lane?
It can be. It really can be. You see everybody wear the same piece of gear, so you're like, oh, well, I guess that's the right piece of gear to wear. And chances are it's true. I mean, chances are there's a reason everyone's worn that. And the fact is you won't be worse off than anybody by wearing that same piece of gear. But if you're the hunter who realizes that, you know what, my damage is ridiculous already. If I stack stam, I'm actually going to have a chance to live a little longer to disengage from the rogue who'd popped on me that I wasn't expecting. Or if you're the warlock that's like, my damage is just not going to be that high anyway. But if I can be annoying as crap by putting undispellable dots on me that will cause a silence if someone tries to pull that, plus popping fears everywhere, and be able to take advantage of that you'll start to see a greater impact in the game, and you'll have more fun with it. I'm not here to be like, oh, you've got to play this way so you make more of an impact for your teammates. Sometimes your teammates suck. Let's put it where it is. But if you have what you want as an option, if you are able to play the way you want to do, then whether your teammates suck or whether your teammates are awesome or whether there's anything in between, you're going to have more fun in this game by gearing towards your playstyle.
Very well stated, Rise. And I think that might be a good bow. How do you feel about that?
I do. I feel that's pretty good.
Are you sure there's nothing else you would like to pontificate?
I think I'd just like to end it with saying that it doesn't take a lot of homework. And don't do a lot of homework. Don't spend your life trying to figure out the perfect gear set unless you're obsessive like me. But do spend a little bit of time understanding the way that you like to play so that you don't get stuck with someone else's pajamas thinking that that's the way to go for your bracket, your class, and your spec. Test, verify, have some fun.
This is a conversation with Yoube, featuring my good friend Rise. We will catch you all on the next side.
Have a good one.